From making matters even more confusing than they already were, to some of the strangest explanations for undeniably bizarre developments you're ever likely to hear. Maybe these directors should have just kept their trap shut upon being nudged over the true meaning behind their film's closing stages. Gareth here from WhatCulture.com, and here are 8 directors who have the worst takes about their own movie endings. Number 8. George Lucas's odd reason for bringing back Hayden Christensen. Return of the Jedi. While many have been quick to call out George Lucas for his decision to repeatedly tinker with his original trilogy in the years since the trio of beloved features initially burst onto the scene, it must be noted that not every alteration was as jarring as the sight of pointless CGI being stuffed into every frame possible. Take the decision to lace Ian McDiarmid's version of Emperor Palpatine into The Empire Strikes Back, for example, papering over the sight of Marjorie Eaton initially playing the Dark Lord of the Sith with superimposed chimpanzee eyes, and effectively linking the prequels with the OG trilogy of flicks. The same cannot be said for the decision to bring Hayden Christensen back into the fold in the closing stages of Return of the Jedi, however, with many quick to question why Lucas opted to revert back to the younger version of Anakin Skywalker after the fallen Jedi ultimately became a Force ghost in the wake of dying much later on in his life. Lucas's explanation for the jarring shift? Well, the director felt that after Anakin was redeemed by saving his son's life, his inner person would go back to where we left it off, suggesting that the Jedi metaphorically died after becoming Vader. In reality though, Sebastian Shaw's version of Skywalker/Vader was likely cut out as a way of jarringly connecting the two trilogies more than anything else. Number 7. Zack Snyder wanted Bruce Kent to take up the Batmantle. Zack Snyder's Justice League. Not content with completely tearing up the first attempt at bringing the DCEU's Justice League into being, with his own 242-minute monster of a director's cut in 2021, Zack Snyder decided to eventually explain what the future would have looked like had the rest of his supervision been followed through on. Snyder would have had Ben Affleck's Batman ultimately sacrifice himself in order to save a pregnant Lois Lane from an incoming Darkseid, an event that would create a timeline that didn't actually see Supes falling under the control of the big bad entity, as seen in the Snyder Cut's nightmare sequence. Said sacrifice would have then paved the way for yet another reboot of sorts later down the road, with Snyder noting to GQ that a future Justice League story would have involved Superman and Lane's son taking up the Batmantle. As he put it, then the end is this epilogue where it's 20 years later, where Superman's son has no powers, he's born without the powers of a god. But then in the end, he would have become the new Batman. Then it would have been a reboot after that. You can just go back to the beginning again, where you could do a small movie with the new Batman or something. Had this reality come to pass, there's a strong chance fans would have never been treated to Matt Reeves' critically acclaimed take on all things Gotham. So it's probably for the best that Snyder's planned never-ending Bat saga was nixed in the end. Number 6. Christopher Nolan thinks Cobb is in his own subjective reality. Inception. The final shot of Christopher Nolan's mind-bending Inception epic has fans still wondering whether Leonardo DiCaprio's Cobb is still in a dream as the film finally cuts to black. The final scene involving Cobb spinning his trusty totem and rushing off to see his children before his last reality test is fully completed has been intensely analysed ever since its debut in 2010, with Nolan's take on the matter only muddying the waters even more. In a speech the director gave at Princeton University in 2015, instead of outright revealing whether or not the final moment of the totem appearing to wobble after spinning for an age meant that the emotional climax was going down within a dream or in reality, Nolan offered up this explanation. The way the end of that film worked, Leonardo DiCaprio's character Cobb, he was off with his kids. He was in his own subjective reality. He didn't really care anymore, and that makes a statement. Perhaps all levels of reality are valid. Contradicting this hint at Cobb's final moments actually being nothing more than the reality he is choosing to believe in, however, Michael Caine would also reveal at a screening for the flick in 2018 that he was told by Nolan, well, when you're in the scene, it's reality. And Caine is very much present during that closing sequence, of course. Simply put, Nolan has done little to clear up this ending in any way, shape or form, because he's an asshole. Number 5. Mary Haron doesn't think it was all in Bateman's head. American Psycho. For the longest time, a great many fans found themselves coming away from Mary Haron's unsettling American Psycho slice of horror, feeling as though the acts they just witnessed being performed by the chilling Patrick Bateman may have actually been a figment of the New York investment banker's imagination all along. This theory certainly adds a new dimension to the horrific murders Bateman is seen executing throughout the 2000 flick's runtime, but the ambiguity of the film's closing scene, which sees the apparent serial killer told that a colleague recently had dinner with a Paul Allen he was sure he'd murdered, wasn't actually designed to leave audiences believing these many horrendous acts could have been in Bateman's head all along. As the film's director Mary Haron would explain, when discussing her frustration at folks walking away from the experience convinced that they'd just been delivered a twist it was all a dream conclusion, one thing I think is a failure on my part is people keep coming out of the film thinking that it's all a dream. And I never intended that. All I wanted was to be ambiguous in the way that the book was. I think it's a failure of mine in the final scene because I just got the emphasis wrong. I should have left it more open-ended. It makes it look like it was all in his head, and as far as I'm concerned, it's not. Much to the annoyance of those who have spent many hours debating the contrary then, in Haron's mind, Christian Bale's unsettling Bateman is very much the serial killer her flick portrays him to be. Number 4, Damien Chazelle doesn't think Andrew makes it out of his 30s alive. Whiplash. After spending an entire movie at each other's throats, with J.K. Simmons Fletcher in particular making Miles Teller's Andrew's life somewhat of a misery as he pursues drumming greatness throughout Whiplash's runtime, Damien Chazelle appeared to offer a flicker of hope in the form of the feature's final beats. The sight of Fletcher and Andrew seemingly being on the same page during the latter stages of the feature's triumphant climactic drum solo, however, isn't enough to guarantee an all-round happy ending for the tortured up-and-coming drummer. That's at least what the director behind the movie itself believes. With Chazelle noting to Screen Crush, I think it's definitely a fleeting thing. I think there's a certain amount of damage that will always have been done. Fletcher will always think he won, and Andrew will be a sad, empty shell of a person and will die in his 30s of a drug overdose. I have a very dark view of where it goes. Yeah, you don't say, mate. Who'd be a drummer, eh? Number 3, J.J. Abrams thinks being a Palpatine is worse than being a nobody. The Rise of Skywalker. For all of the divisive reviews that were sent Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi's way in the wake of its 2017 release, the decision to have Daisy Ridley's Rey be revealed as little more than a nobody during the middle entry of the sequels was one that many felt acted as perhaps the most inspired plot twist the franchise had introduced in years. But then, in what felt like little more than a lazy attempt to appeal to those who had been theorizing over Rey's heritage since The Force Awakens blasted off into theaters in 2015, J.J. Abrams decided to bizarrely undo Johnson's work from the film prior and have Rey be actually revealed to have been a Palpatine all along. Stripping away the idea that any average human could find it within themselves to make a difference, Abrams eventually explained that he felt the You're Nobody direction simply wasn't as painful as his Palpatine development. As he put it, though I completely understand You're Nobody is a devastating thing, to me the more painful, the more shocking thing was the idea that you're actually from the worst possible place. And it was because of this decision to lazily lean into what came before, instead of heading into the unexplored waters that were teased in Episode 8, that fans were ultimately exposed to Rey duking it out with her granddaddy in Rise of Skywalker's climax. Whatever way you slice it, the Force was not strong with this particular take, and Episode 9 suffered the consequences as a result, as did we. Number 2, Richard Kelly goes too far with his unfiltered cut, Donnie Darko. In a rare case of a director's cut actually somehow finding a way to undo the brilliant theatrical work that came before it, Richard Kelly's unfiltered take on Donnie Darko, released a few years after the film's commercially unsuccessful 2001 cinema bow, pretty much murdered any and all mystique the Jake Gyllenhaal starring cult hit once possessed. Despite initially being received quite well by fans and critics alike, the addition of 20 minutes worth of once deleted scenes and a boatload of superimposed text from the fictional philosophy of time travel book shed unwanted light on a number of ambiguous plot points, such as the existence of tangent and primary universes that had once been a source of many a fan theory and compelling post-flick discussion. Sure, Kelly's need to explain each and every potential loose end once prevalent in the theatrical entry made the film a touch more accessible, but at what cost? A great many who had originally been captivated by the mystery and limitless potential of their own imaginations upon taking Darko in a few years earlier were left wondering why the director felt the need to painfully spoon-feed an already compelling tale to his audience. Number 1, Stanley Kubrick thinks Dave was turned into a super being, 2001 A Space Odyssey. And finishing off with another flick that once spawned countless different theories over what in the hell it all meant, by the time the credits rolled, Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey provided audiences sequences with one of the most confusing yet intriguing conclusions in movie history. Yet while many have spent hours trying to unpack the finale of David Bowman seemingly going from decrepit old man to baby floating towards Earth, Kubrick himself actually revealed the true meaning behind this enigmatic ending many moons ago. According to the legendary director in a rare interview many years back, upon discovering another monolith, Dave is taken in by godlike entities, creatures of pure energy, and intelligence with no shape or form. Then, after being studied in a human zoo of sorts, his whole life passes from that point on in that room. And if that wasn't enough, Kubrick would then surreally add, anyway, when they get finished with him, as happens in so many myths of all cultures in the world, he is transformed into some kind of super being and sent back to Earth, transformed and made into some sort of Superman. So for those eternally searching for some deeper meaning in the closing stretch of this 1968 classic, it turns out Kubrick was simply on the cusp of forging his own brand of superverse.